Hi everyone, it's Rachel and Anthony.
Hello.
From Don't Crop Me Now. And today I would say that it's the end of the month. It's actually the 1st of October, but we are doing our end of September tour. Before we start the tour, comment below if you can see the absolutely massive change that we've had in the background above my head. Now, I'm not sure what it's been like for the rest of you with allotments, but certainly here in northwest England in South Manchester, September has been that month where it really started to cool down. The beginning of the month was still quite warm, but towards the end of the month the temperatures have really dropped, and that's had a big effect on all the crops that we've had in at the plot. So without further ado, let's crack on and have a look around our equivalent of 2 full plots in South Manchester. We're going to start on plot 4, which is our main plot and the plot that we have had the longest. Now, a lot of the crops you will see we've still got in, even though the weather has started to get much colder, but there are some crops that we will keep in the ground to eat over the winter months, and these parsnips are one of those. As you can see, they look absolutely brilliant. I'm not sure these are really that much different from last month because we tend to leave these to after the first frost. But what I will do is just try to get in to see if we can see the top of any of those roots, and that might give us the idea about how large these roots are. So you can see that they are a big root on the top, and that probably means that in theory they may have a diameter of this sort of size on the top of those roots. So this is far too many parsnips for us to eat, so I think I might try harvesting a few quite soon, but the majority that are for our winter table. So behind here you can see these have definitely changed a lot over the last month. These are the sunflowers. As you can see here, all those sunflower seeds have completely gone. They have either dropped on the floor, and in the main they've been eaten by squirrels. However, we also did collect a little bit of seed off the different types of sunflowers so that we will sow next year. Behind there we actually have a carrot bed, so let's have a look at that. Not that much has been going on in this carrot bed because we didn't have amazing germination, and I did re-sow a couple of times, but I sort of gave up on it and thought, you know what, let's just keep a few of these better carrots in for the winter. But if we have a look in here, you can see here there are lots of really good looking carrots. And this is a variety that is suitable for overwintering. It's a variety called Bellycrumb, a German variety, and they overwinter quite well. So I'm going to keep those, probably a good proportion of them, definitely for Christmas dinner. Well, beetroot is a crop that always does really well for us, but this year our early sown beetroot didn't actually do as well. I think I sowed them in plugs and I left them in a little bit too long. But this second sowing of beetroot is looking absolutely brilliant, and this is the one that I will pick for pickling. And if you look in there, you can see there are lots and lots of beetroots. In fact, let me just pull one out and just have a quick look for you guys. There we go, a nice size of beetroot, and I'm not sure on the exact date these were sown, but I will put them up on the video. So don't forget that try and sow a first sowing and a second sowing where you can for certain crops, because it can really make a difference on your productivity on your plots. Courgettes are a crop that always does well for us, and every year I say I'm not going to put in loads of courgette plants, but every year I do put too many. And as you can see here, these courgettes have now turned out to giant marrows. They're not the same species of marrows, they won't store in the same way, but you can do quite a lot with cooking and preserving. This isn't the only courgette bed we have. We also have at least 2 or 3 more plants elsewhere. So these are just going to be left for now. You can see this one's starting to die back. It's probably been hit by a little bit of the cold weather so far. One thing I've been really pleased with this year actually, and I think I'm going to show you this now because we've got a beautiful flower on this hosta here, is this tiny little pond that we have. We've got 2 ponds on our allotment. The other one is more completely for wildlife. There are actually 2 tiny fish that are in this pond. But what I did do is plant some plants all the way around the edge and also put a lily in there. And you know, I think it's looking really pretty and really nice. So there's certainly been a big change in this area. We have pruned back the lavender bushes, and so hopefully we get a nice neat display for next year, and that means we've refound this path in the middle. The plants that were on this side didn't quite do as well. They were a little bit overgrown by those potatoes that have been in, so I decided to take them out. However, I do have a few sort of small lavender plants in pots, so I'm just going to decide whether I'm going to refill this area with lavender this spring. The potatoes we tend to leave to store in these tubs for over winter. So I think I'll move them off this bed and move them into an area where I can stack them up 2 or 3 on top of each other. But you can just see that we do leave them like this. These little grids that are on the top there, that is to stop the squirrels digging in the potato pots. You'll probably see when we look at some that we've got that are further down the plot that the squirrels have had a good go at digging those potatoes that are near the surface out. They're not actually trying to eat the potatoes, but they're trying to bury their nuts, and those potatoes are in the way. One thing that I have noticed is we do have a couple of Jerusalem artichoke plants that are growing here. Now, there wasn't any Jerusalem artichokes in this bed, but there used to be a big tub of them, a 100-litre tub, that was up just in front of that raspberry frame. Last spring, what I did is I emptied that out, and some of them, tiny ones, must have fallen onto this bed. So what I will need to do is just to make sure we remove those tubes that are around these plants, because they are very invasive and I don't want them to set in here. Behind me, you can actually see that these dahlias are doing a brilliant autumn display here. They should do this until we have those first frosts. Over the last few weeks, we have been deadheading these and given them a bit of a prune back, and I think that's what's given them that extra boost at this time of year. Underneath the net, we do have some Swede plants. If Anthony comes round, we can have a quick look. These went in very late. I'm not sure how much they're really going to sort of swell up, but I'd sown the plants, so I thought I'd do it anyway. Let's have a quick nosy. Stuck together there. Oh, you know what? Look, they are starting to swell up there. So potentially we should get hopefully at least some Swedes for the winter months, even if they're not actually that big. And another plant that seems to have had a really late summer to autumn flush has been this rhubarb here. And this really struggled early in the year with the lack of rain, but later on it had a massive boost. So it's only just about starting to die down now, which for us here in Manchester is quite unusual. What I will do is I will pull the plants out that are around the edge that are just on the path. I'll throw them back on the top and I will allow that to die down naturally, and I will mulch over that bed either with well rotted manure or even some leaf mulch just well there. You can see behind me we used to have some dwarf peas on this frame. We have cleared these off and we have collected these for seed. Behind there is the asparagus bed. You know what, it's looking pretty good. That will need cutting down eventually, but I'm quite happy with how that is going. We didn't get a brilliant crop of asparagus this year because unfortunately one of the local cats, who we absolutely love because we love cats, it's one of our favourite animals, decided to have a good chew on all of the emerging asparagus shoots. So we only had sort of one sort of crop because every time they were coming up they were getting in there. So I don't know whether we might have to cover them in some way for next year. These autumn raspberries are in absolute full production. We have picked loads of these, and as you can still see, there's still loads ready for us to pick. These are a variety that are called Autumn Bliss. I know that is grown regularly on allotment sites, but they're quite a productive plant. We have grown these, we actually got given these when we first took our plot on nearly 20 years ago, and we have grown these by just replacing the new shoots over time. Now, a crop that I have never been able to master growing is Celeriac. Anthony really doesn't like this crop, but I do. But again, once again, we've just not had enough water to get those roots to really completely swell. But you can see it has this lovely green top, and you can dry these. It's the same family as parsley. They're a little bit tougher, the leaves, than parsley, but if you want to chop and dry them, they work really well as a dried herb or add into things like stews. I'm not sure if I'll grow as many next year. Sometimes I feel I had to have some sort of acceptance with the things that we do well on and the things that we don't do well on. But I've tried to never lose that hope with these, but you know what, it's the same thing every year. If you've got any tips about growing celeriac, then do let us know, and that might help us improve if we choose to try again next year. Next to the celeriac, we do have some kohlrabi. If Anthony can zoom in on those. We did have these covered up because the pigeons love to attack the leaves, and you can see where this has happened around here. That is not slug damage. Well, there's tiny bits perhaps are, but where it's been chewed down like this is definitely pigeon damage. I decided to take these covers off these crops just because it will discourage getting lots of whitefly over the winter, and also the bit we want to eat is that sort of root bit that's swelled up, rather than necessarily the bits that are on the top. So if the pigeons eat those, I'm not too worried about it anyway. Now you can see how crazy the weather is. I know behind me here it looks very grey, maybe looking like some rain clouds could be coming over. But if Anthony just turns around a little bit, you can see on the other side it's absolutely bright blue and very, very sunny. But we are in Manchester, so we tend to get this type of weather. On this climbing arch, you know, this hasn't been 100% successful this year. The sweet peas did really well, and we've left these to go to seed. We still need to collect these, but they're at the right sort of time. You can see here that that's going nice and crispy, and in fact it's starting to open up a little bit, and that's usually a sign that you should get picking your seeds to collect them to dry. On this side, we put this squash plant in. It decided to start growing really late. And you know what? It's got a few little flowers on it. I don't know if it will set any squash. I'm going to leave it until the frost. And you never know, we might get some tiny little ones. And I might try again next year with something else on this side of the frame. This is our edamame or soya bean crop. And you know what? We have got beans. Certainly enough for me to collect seed from. They were quite expensive seed, and we only got about 10, as you can see by the number of plants. You know what, with this hot weather, they've actually done pretty well. You can see there's quite a lot of pods on each one, so I think I will collect these seed and try for growing a slightly larger amount to get a better crop for eating for next year. In front of Anthony, we've got another courgette plant with some giant courgettes on. And then just to his left, we have the giant potatoes that we grew, this one for seeds. So what I didn't do with this one was to rub all the eyes off the potatoes, so there is only one left. So in theory, these shouldn't be particularly large potatoes, but there should be a number of them on there. Our giant potatoes themselves had quite a lot of scab. They were quite big, but they weren't particularly pretty looking. So fingers crossed these ones are a little bit better and we can keep them for seed for next year. Here's our other main potato bed, and you can see an illustration of what I was talking about here, where there is a tiny little potato that is on the surface, and that is the squirrels digging them out. So on here we didn't have enough of those little metal grids to be able to put over the top of all these potatoes, which is why I will probably stack them up on top of each other to try and stop those squirrels having access over the winter. In the background here we have got spring cabbage, which we actually planted one evening after work this week. So they're looking a little bit sad, but that's because they came bare rooted, so they've had a bit of a transplant shock, and they will pick up, and hopefully they will give us lots of greens for those spring months. On these two beds that are right behind me, the one that's to Anthony's left is mainly full of even more giant courgettes, but there also are some other types of squash in the background. You can probably see just better here where one has grown out that they are a spaghetti type of squash, and that's a really big one. There's quite a few that are within that bed. They're a really interesting squash that has a texture that you can sort of shred the flesh up, and they're used a lot as a replacement if you're trying to reduce the amount of carbs in your diet. We do have quite a lot of other squashes which we'll come to, but they are behind those bean frames. Before we look there, I will just show you these cabbages. These are Savoy cabbages. So if Anthony comes in and looks over the top, hopefully he can see that they are really nicely formed cabbages. I'm definitely going to take a couple of those this afternoon and probably over this weekend do a bit of food prep. I'm not sure what, but watch out and we'll tell you what we've been making with those. Now let's talk beans. Now we love growing beans for drying. In fact, we're overrun with beans. As you can see, particularly these Borlotti beans are a really effective high yield growing crop. If you are interested in finding out about which of the different types of beans that we grow and what their different yields are growing in the north of England, and we are in South Manchester, then I'll put a link in the description to an article I wrote on our website about comparing those yields. The Borlotti beans are definitely one of the best on there, but also behind me and here I've got many different types of beans that are for drying, and this is only on plot 4. There are more beans also on plot 5B as well. Behind me we have another squash bed, and you can see this really nice specimen. This is a Crown Prince squash, and there are many different types. I think there are 2 or 3 different varieties within this bed alone. As you can see, it's taken a bit of a bid for freedom, and it's also spreading in that direction as well. So when talking about when you should harvest your squashes, if you have a look at this plant in general, it's still very, very green. So I would say that it's too early to harvest these squash plants yet. You need to wait till the top of the plants ideally is starting to die down, and then if Anthony comes in here and has a look at this specimen here, what you can do is cut at 2 places either side of where the shoot comes out the top of the fruit, giving you a nice T, which helps with the storing qualities of the squash. If you are finding that you're growing, for example, pumpkins, and you know what, it's getting closer and closer to Halloween and you're wanting to pick them for those purposes, you can take the squash earlier, but they might not keep as well as if you let the plants die down by their own accord. Another thing that we put in as a second crop was these leek plants, and you know what, they're actually growing much better than I thought they would do because we put them in quite late, but they are definitely filling out. So hopefully we should have at least some baby leeks to have over the winter. Now under this cover we still have our 2 giant cabbage, which are absolutely massive. We are going to have to harvest them this month. I haven't really got a plan for those as yet, but do watch out. We'll do a separate video about the harvest because I'm really hoping that's going to be quite exciting, because this one in particular, if I can feel here, is just absolutely massive. The flower bed on the front of plot 4 is looking a little bit worse for wear, I would say. A lot of these plants are starting to make a bit of a dieback for winter. At this time of year, it's quite a good idea to give some of the herbaceous perennial plants a bit of a prune on the top, and these larger ones as well try to stop them going so unruly. So we will need to get on with that probably over the next month as well. But not much has happened over September on this flower bed. It's pretty much been left as it is. I will do some work over the winter, hopefully change the structure a bit. For example, as nice as these, I'm not sure what these are called, I can't remember, these sort of thistle ornamental plants are, I think they might be a little bit too big for our flower bed, so I might have to get them out. So this definitely will be a winter job to look at organisation in our flower bed. We've been doing quite a lot of composting over the last month, and as you can see, we've just got this layer of cardboard over the top just to add a few extra browns in. But over the last week particularly, we've been adding in a lot of shredded leaves. If I put in this pile here, and hopefully Anthony might see that that temperature will start shooting up. and that is that top layer of the compost where we put a huge amount of those leaves in. And certainly that's been a busy job over the last month, but that will also be a busy job for October as well. As we harvest all the crops, we will continue to build our compost heaps. Now, in terms of plot 2B itself, except from the composting, I'll be honest, not really much has gone on this plot. We've had a tiny bit of a tidy up. We certainly tidied up a little bit in the fruit cage and weeded some plants that were coming up in between the patio slabs. We've also moved this frame here, which we had given to another plot holder who has now given up. So we decided just to take this back. I'm not sure we'll use it in the same format, but we'll probably want to reuse the wood. So that's just been left here for storage. But other than that, it's going to be pruning that really takes place probably around Christmas to January. So there hasn't really been much going on this plot. There is obviously the polytunnel on the back here. And if we have a look at the polytunnel, again, I would say there's not a massive amount of difference. We have moved all the onions that were on the floor and taken them home. And then really we have just been harvesting when we can from here. Things are still, if Fancy comes here, you can see even on this cucumber plant, even at the top here, 1, 2, 3, 4 cucumbers, just even in this section here. You can see more in the background. So there are a lot of plant fruits that we are still harvesting in here. And other than that, we haven't really done anything extra in this. It's getting a bit late to plant plants for winter in this polytunnel, so over the next week or so we'll have to make a decision about cutting certain things down if we want to plant things like parsley or coriander or some winter salads in here. Certainly you've probably only got the next 2 to 3 weeks to be able to do that, so I'm going to make a decision on that over the next couple of weeks to decide whether we want to use that polytunnel for that over winter. Now, just as we were walking out of the door to finish the filming here, I noticed that we've actually got some really brilliant green peppers on some of these plants. So I thought I would show you them. I'm not sure what we're going to do with them, but they look great. We also have a lot of these tomatillos, and I had just a sort of a feel of in the pods. And they have definitely got, if I pick one, they've definitely got some sort of fruit in here. There we go. So I do believe these are not ready to harvest because they should go, I believe, please correct me if you know any more than I do, they should go a bit more papery and these fruits should be a little bit bigger than they are now. But you know what, we've got some fruits, hopefully over the next couple of weeks. If not, you know what, we could pick them like that and make some green tomato salsa, I guess. So I would say it's been pretty much a success really growing those. Now, what a year it has been for apples and pears. We harvested loads of pears off this tree, also loads of apples, particularly our cooking apples. And so at this end, we've had a bit of a prune, particularly of that grafted apple tree. And there's a bit of a tidy up that has gone up on this end. There's been a delivery of wood chips, so we've just taken a few of these. They're still quite green, but that will burn out and it'll be absolutely fine to use as chipping for the paths. So we've just piled a little bit of this up here, so as we clear the beds we can lay this in a bit of a more tidy manner on a few of the paths that still have chippings on this part of the plot. We've also taken some strawberry runners that are in our cold frames, and we do need to get on top of sorting out this strawberry bed and just cutting it back a little bit for winter. And that's a job that we haven't really got around to yet, but that needs to be done quite soon. Behind us here, we harvested a lot of crops that were just to go on the compost. So we had some sprouting broccoli here that was setting seeds. That's been taken down and shredded for the compost. We've got more beetroot here. And you know, I said this was actually our early sown beetroot, which didn't grow as well. But if I look on here where we've got this yellow beetroot, let's pick one of those. Yeah, they're pretty good actually. Actually, they're really nice. So I think within there we might actually have some okay bulbs. So that's better than I thought it was going to be really. So that's been a good surprise for me today. Behind me, again, more beans, beans and beans, and these are all different types of varieties. You can see that these ones here are a little bit further on than the blotty in terms of drying off, but as you can see, there's quite a range with that. If we look at this variety around here, Hopefully I have a label on here somewhere. This be where I can't find the label, which is absolutely right, I can't find the label. But as you can see here, these ones here, if Anthony comes in, if you give that a shake, sort of, you can feel that they're quite crispy in there. So those ones are just about ready to pick. And the ones behind us here, again, are looking quite good, but some are still very green, particularly the ones that are runner varieties rather than climbing French varieties. I tend to find that they keep going a little bit longer as it cools down. Other than that, on this plot, there's still a few things in this bed. There's some shallots that we've forgot to pick. We've got fennel that I left to go to seed, really for the bees. They're quite enjoying that. And behind we've got some perennial spinach, which should serve us quite well throughout the winter. Before we look at what that monster is growing in the background over there, I will show you this Malabar spinach. We haven't picked much of this yet, but I tasted some of the leaves, you know, and they're quite nice. So if we come in here and Anthony has a good look at this plant, it's done really well. There are a lot of leaves within there. So I think it's time to get harvesting those and time to start using those, I think, in making some curries, which would be nice. Now, the last thing we've got to show you on this plot is this, firstly, absolutely massive gourd plant. It is a shark fin melon or a fig leaf gourd. I haven't actually managed to pick any of these yet, so there are definitely some large fruits on there that we can set seed from, but there are also a number of smaller fruits. There's a good example just here, right on the top of, sitting on top of the Brussels plants, and that is, as I'm advised, there's a great YouTuber that I follow called Mothin from My Family Garden, who actually gave me these seeds, and he was advising that you should pick them when they're smaller like that for eating. So I think we should pick some of those and maybe try some of those in a few recipes as well. They are pretty much covering up this brassica bed. Underneath here is the Brussels. We haven't done anything with these since planting them out in spring, but they are for that winter crop. Once this gourd plant starts to die down, I'll have a good look in there, make sure that they are set up for winter. On this bed here is the main sort of summer cabbage bed. So we've harvested a few from here. If Anthony comes round, he might be able to see if I can get in. For example, here is one of the Filderkraut cabbages, which is a large pointed variety, particularly used for making sauerkraut. If I go in there and just have a point and pinch on this for a bit of a comparison, you can see that they're quite large plants. And in the background there, we do have some absolutely perfect red cabbages. I think I'm going to pick those today actually, and I'm going to pickle those in vinegar. We quite like that for winter. So it wasn't completely the last thing I wanted to show you. These are runner beans, and hopefully that's a good illustration. You can see that a lot of the runner beans are still very green, the plants themselves. There are a few that have sort of dried out. If you want to pick these beans, you need to be picking the ones that look like this if you want to keep them for storage rather than eating fresh. When we planted the spring cabbage, we also put some spring kale in this section here. There's quite a lot of plants. I imagine they are actually dwarf plants, but they will probably grow a bit bigger than this container here. But at the moment, all of our netting is used up over the summer cabbages still that we haven't harvested. So I put this here, and when we harvest the summer cabbages, I will then reuse that netting to make a sort of taller structure over this kale. In the background, we have got the summer brassicas, calabrese and cauliflowers that have gone to seed, which I'm allowing to go to seed. Hopefully you might see that there's a few little pollinating insects around there. Hopefully we are going to collect some of that seed to save for ourselves. And then lastly, in the back, we've just got the coal frames and the greenhouse. So these two coal frames are just being used for storage really. We have got some strawberry runners and some lavender plants in there, and on this side a lot of the cuttings that we have taken of the various fruit crops. We've got fig cuttings there, gooseberry cuttings, blueberry cuttings, and gooseberries and blackcurrants. I think I said gooseberries, blackcurrants. So there are a few different types of cuttings. I've just put them in here with this netting over the top just to give them a tiny bit of protection over winter if it does get very, very cold. But they are pretty frost hardy, so it shouldn't be a problem. It also just made it a bit tidier for us to have them in here. And the last thing is this greenhouse. So I'm not going to go inside here because one, it's completely like a jungle. We picked quite a lot of chilies this week, and we started our first sort of ferment of chilies, but there are still loads and loads of chilies in there. You can see some of the longer ones that are growing around here. What we will do, maybe today or tomorrow or perhaps Monday, is I'm planning to pick a load of green chilies, and I'm going to try and make my own version of a green chili pickle. I actually bought some of Mothin's from My Family Garden's green pickle. It was absolutely delicious. I'm going to have a go at making something, just get a recipe online and see what we can make ourselves in terms of that and see how it turns out. Now, if you've made it this far, then we'll give you the answer to what was changed above my head. So if we look in the background in front of those terrace houses there used to be a line of really overgrown massive trees, and they have now been cut down. They're actually on the external border of the ground, so they are on the outside rather than part of our ground, but they've been cut down, and that is going to make a really big difference for us in terms of keeping on top of that flower border that we put in over there for next spring. And that is where we got some of these chippings from. We are getting extremely close to 2,000 subscribers on our channel, which is something that we didn't imagine would happen. So that is absolutely brilliant. So therefore, if you have enjoyed the video today, please like, comment and subscribe. It only takes a minute, but it makes a really big difference for our channel. So take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.